Hello friends, in this series of international relation, today we will cover the Indo-China relationship, and in this video we will cover the following 5 major points, that is the history of Indo-China relation, the disputes which are further divided into two types, border and economic disputes, the relationship tenets, the challenges for India and the initiative taken by India. The history of Indo-China relation in modern times is seen under the three important communist leaders, that is Mao, Zheng, and Xi Jinping. Under Mao, China stood up. Under Zheng, it became rich. And under Xi Jinping, it became powerful. So, we will see all of them under the timeline, which is as follows. Under the leadership of Mao Zedong, the lessons learned for China were: first, it stood up against the external forces. It held strong responses to any perceived attack on its sovereignty and rejection of ideas that diluted national interest. For example, glorification of Western values. He introduced the concept of Sinicization, that is, socialism with Chinese condition. He also gave the territorial theory under which Tibet was considered to be the right palm, Ladakh, Sikkim, Bhutan, Nepal, and Arunachal Pradesh were the five fingers of China. The next leader, Zhang Xiaoping, emphasized on political centralization, and his major focus was to make China a rich country. For this, he also introduced many reforms, but it resulted in 1989's Tiananmen crisis, where people revolted against the corruption in the CPC, but the political leadership retaliated through reduced political freedom and increased centralization. His one of the views were, if a farmer has 3 ducks, he is a socialist, but if he has 5 ducks, he is a capitalist. He did not consider socialism as a poverty. Thus, his recipe for success was grip of ideology and one man totalitarianism. During the time of Zen, China's GDP was just 1.75% of global GDP, that is $149 billion, but it increased rapidly in the Xi Jinping's time and went to 15% of global GDP, that was $12.2 trillion. As we can see that China made a huge success in its economic sphere. It was able to bring nearly 800 million people out of poverty. But Xi Jinping focused on great political centralization, that is, away from collective leadership model to rule by one core leader. His economic policy differed from Zhang, as during his time China shifted from highly centralized planned economy to a socialist market economy. Also, under the diplomatic sphere, Zhang's focus was more on making China rich and keeping low profile in international relations, whereas Xi Jinping focused on wolf warrior diplomacy, that is, making China assertive, proactive, and living a high profile life in international relations. Despite the massive success of China, it had certain shortcomings. It became among the most unequal society of the world. It faced unparalleled environmental challenges which were spilling beyond its border. Also, the rapidly shrinking state welfare packages made the elderly population more vulnerable. It also saw disturbing gender imbalance. India, being its neighbor, faces certain disputes with China which can be seen in form of border disputes and economic disputes. The initial border between India and China was drawn in 1865 in form of Johansen-Ardagh line, which was between Kashmir and Xinjiang region. In 1878, China reconquered Xinjiang region, and in 1893 a new line, MacDonald line, was drawn over here. In year 1914, a Shimla Accord was signed and McMahon line was drawn in the Tawang Valley region, which comprises of India's eastern border. As you can see, there are two major regions, the East region and the West region, where India faces border disputes with China. In the Western region, you can see there are majorly four lines. The first of them was the Johansen line. The second was the McCarthy-MacDonald line. And the rest were the Indian line of perception and the Chinese line of perception. Under the Chinese line of perception, the line runs near the Karakoram Pass, and the Indian line of perception is more near to the McDonald line. And in eastern region, you can see the McMahon line, which is in the Tawang Valley. India took certain approaches to tackle these border issues. The first is the Nehruvian Panchsheel. The second is the Indian approach after the 1962 war. Friends, here to remember the Nehruvian Panchsheel, I have created a short trick, that is Reni is peaceful and cooperative. I remember this because Reni is a friend of mine. She used to share a border of our room in the hostel. So here the R stands for mutual respect, E stands for equality and mutual benefits, N stands for mutual non-aggression, I stands for mutual non-interference, P and C stands for peaceful and coexistence. And these were the 5 principles of Nehruvian Panchsheel which were to be followed in international relation. Next is the India's approach after 1962 war. India created a Mountain Strike Corps, a joint working group for confidence building measures. Third one is the agreement regarding LAC. Here you can pause and read the process which India followed to solve the border disputes. The fourth one was the BDCA, that is Border Defense Corporation Agreement, which was signed in 2013. Under the economic disputes, there are 3 major disputes. First is the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. Second is the debt trap diplomacy of China. Third is the string of pearls. These economic disputes has raised certain concerns for India. The first one is, are they based on international norms, openness, and principle of financial responsibility? The threat to ecological and environmental protection, transparent assessment of projects, skill and technology transfer, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Despite these disputes, the Indo-China relation had certain tenets or the converging points, that is, the colonial subjugation, shared identity and belief in principles of NAM, that is non-aligned movement, opposition to great power hegemony, strong belief in sovereignty and strategic autonomy. The challenges in the Indo-China relationship can be challenge to India's position in world order, blocking trade routes and Chinese control over the strategic ports under its String of Pearls initiative, many Chinese companies displacing Indian competitors for strategic infrastructure projects. Example, the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, Gwadar port in Iran. After facing these challenges, India has taken certain initiatives like the Malabar exercise, Project Mosam, Sagarmala initiative, under which India focuses on port modernization, connectivity enhancement, coastal community development, port-led industrialization, and developing new ports. India's policy of Act East and String of Flowers to counter String of Pearls of China. To make this content, I have referred to the sources such as articles by Alka Acharya, who is a professor in JNU. Hopefully friends, these videos are helpful and informative. So please do share it with your friends and do like and subscribe to the channel.